I realized my family hated me the day they toasted to my sister at my own wedding reception. Not a metaphor, not an exaggeration. They literally raised their glasses to celebrate her accomplishments while I stood there in my wedding dress. What came after, what I discovered 3 hours later, changed everything I thought I knew about my entire childhood. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I became invisible in my own life. Growing up, I always knew I was different in my family, not special different, wrong different. My sister Emily was 2 years younger than me, and from the moment she could walk, she was the sun everyone orbited around. I don't remember my parents ever explaining why. It was just understood, like gravity, that Emily mattered more. When I brought home straight A's in 5th grade, my mother glanced at my report card and said, "That's nice, honey." When Emily brought home a B+ 2 years later, they took her to her favorite restaurant and bought her the toy she'd been wanting. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was being petty, jealous, that I needed to be happy for my sister. But there's something that happens to you when you spend 18 years trying to earn love that's given freely to someone else. You start to believe you're fundamentally unlovable, that there's something broken inside you. I learned to make myself smaller, to need less, to celebrate Emily's wins as if they were my own. Because if I couldn't be loved, at least I could be useful, at least I could be the good daughter who never caused problems. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you'll understand this part, the way you learn to anticipate rejection before it comes. The way you stop sharing good news because you already know how the conversation will redirect to someone else. When I got accepted to medical school, I almost didn't tell them. I knew what would happen. And I was right. My father congratulated me, then immediately started talking about Emily's new marketing job. My mother asked if medical school was really what I wanted, or if I was just trying to prove something. I dropped out 3 months later, not because of them, I told myself, because I realized medicine wasn't my passion. But the truth is, it's hard to pursue anything when the people who raised you can't muster enthusiasm for your dreams. I became a teacher instead. Elementary school, it was good work, meaningful work, and I was happy. Or at least, I was content. I'd learned the difference by then between happiness and the absence of acute pain. And then I met David. He was a parent of one of my students, recently divorced, kind in a way that felt unfamiliar. He listened when I talked, actually listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak or looking for an exit from the conversation. When I told him about my family, he got quiet, then he said something I'd never heard before. He said, "That's not normal, the way they treat you. That's not how families are supposed to work." I laughed it off, told him every family had its dynamics, that I was probably exaggerating, being dramatic. But something about hearing someone else name it, validate it, made something crack open inside me. We dated for 2 years. He never pushed me to confront my family. He just made space for me to exist fully. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, not for what I could provide or how well I could diminish myself. Just for who I was. It was terrifying and beautiful, and I didn't trust it completely. When David proposed, I said yes immediately, and then I made the mistake I'd been trained to make my whole life. I tried to include my family in the wedding planning, thinking maybe this would be the thing that finally brought us together. Maybe my wedding would be the event that made them see me, really see me, as someone worthy of celebration. The moment I told them I was engaged, my mother's first question was whether Emily was seeing anyone. My father asked if we'd set a date, then immediately said they'd need to check their calendar because Emily had some work conferences coming up. I told myself it was fine, I was used to this, I'd plan a beautiful wedding, and maybe on the actual day, things would be different. David wanted to elope. He'd seen enough of my family dynamics to know this wouldn't end well. But I insisted. I told him I needed this, needed to have my family there, needed to believe they could show up for me this one time. Looking back, I can see I was still that little girl holding up her report card, desperately hoping this achievement would finally be enough. The wedding planning was exactly what you'd expect. My mother had opinions about everything, but they were never really about me. She worried the venue wasn't nice enough, that people would judge our family. She fretted over the guest list and the catering, but she never once asked me what I wanted, what kind of day would make me happy, what my vision was. Emily was asked to be a bridesmaid. She agreed, but complained constantly about the dress, the timing, the commitment. She missed 2 of the 3 dress fittings. She skipped the bridal shower my best friend organized because she had a date. And my parents defended her every time. She's busy, Sarah, she has her own life, don't be so demanding. I swallowed it all, apologized for asking too much, made myself smaller, like I always did. David watched all of this happening and tried to talk to me about it several times. He was gentle, never pushy. He'd say things like, "You deserve people who show up for you," or "It's okay to be upset about this, you know." But I'd brush him off, change the subject, find a way to justify their behavior. That's just how they are, it's fine, I'm fine. The night before the wedding, we had a rehearsal dinner at a restaurant David and I loved. Small, intimate, about 30 people. My family arrived late. Emily walked in wearing an outfit that was clearly more appropriate for a nightclub than a rehearsal dinner. My mother spent the first 20 minutes apologizing to guests for the restaurant choice, saying they'd wanted somewhere nicer. During dinner, when David's father gave a toast about how happy he was to welcome me into their family, my mother looked bored. When David's best man told a funny story about how David talked about me constantly, about how in love he clearly was, Emily rolled her eyes. And when I stood up to thank everyone for coming, to say how much it meant to have them there, my father checked his phone. I sat back down and felt David's hand find mine under the table. He squeezed it and I squeezed back, blinking away tears. The wedding day itself started beautifully. The weather was perfect. The venue looked like something out of a fairy tale. I got ready with my bridesmaids, listening to music, drinking champagne, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. Emily showed up an hour late to hair and makeup, unapologetic, complaining about traffic even though she lived 10 minutes away. My mother arrived and immediately started criticizing small details. The flowers were too pale, my hair looked too formal. But I'd expected that, I'd armored myself for that. I focused on David, on the fact that in a few hours, I'd be married to someone who actually loved me. The ceremony itself was beautiful. David cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. I cried when we said our vows. For 30 perfect minutes, I forgot about everything else. It was just us, making promises we meant to keep. And then we got to the reception. That's where everything I'd been trying to ignore, trying to explain away, trying to endure, finally came crashing down. The reception started normally enough, cocktail hour, dinner, the usual wedding progression. David and I made our rounds greeting guests. We were genuinely happy, despite everything, despite my family's behavior. I was married to someone I loved, surrounded by people who cared. Then came the toasts. David's best man went first, told some funny stories, said some sweet things, perfect. Then my maid of honor, my best friend Rachel, gave a toast that made me cry in the best way. She talked about how far I'd come. She didn't mention my family explicitly, but everyone who knew me understood what she meant when she said I deserved all the love I was finally letting in. Then my father stood up. I actually felt hopeful for a second. Maybe he'd surprise me, maybe this would be the moment. He started conventionally enough, talked about me as a child, some generic memories. I was a good student, a responsible kid. Then he pivoted. He started talking about Emily, about what an incredible sister she was, how proud they were of her career. I stood there in my wedding dress, next to my new husband, listening to my father talk about my sister at my own wedding reception. The room got quiet, uncomfortable quiet. People weren't sure if this was some kind of joke they weren't getting. But my father kept going. He said he was grateful I'd found David, because now Emily wouldn't feel pressure to settle down before she was ready. He said my getting married took some of the focus off Emily, gave her room to breathe and build her career. And then, I swear I'm not making this up, he raised his glass and said, "To Emily, for being patient with all of this." Half the room stared in shock. A few people actually gasped. My mother raised her glass and drank, like this was completely normal. Emily, sitting at the family table, looked mildly embarrassed but didn't say anything, didn't tell Dad to stop, didn't apologize. Just sat there, accepting the toast like she deserved it, like this was appropriate and fine and not absolutely devastating. I felt David's hand on my back, felt him lean in to whisper something supportive, but I couldn't hear him through the ringing in my ears. My father sat down, looking satisfied like he'd just given a touching father of the bride speech. My mother patted his hand approvingly. Rachel grabbed the microphone and tried to recover, made a joke, got people laughing again, but the damage was done. I excused myself and walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and finally let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. This wasn't about Emily getting more attention. This was about my father using my wedding, my one day, to celebrate her instead. This was about my parents being so fundamentally incapable of seeing me that even on my wedding day, I was just a supporting character. I didn't cry, I was past crying. I just sat there in my beautiful wedding dress, feeling something inside me finally break permanently. Rachel found me 10 minutes later. She didn't try to minimize it or make excuses. She just said, "That was fucked up, Sarah." I nodded. It really was, and I couldn't pretend anymore that it was anything else. She helped me fix my makeup. We went back out. I danced with David. I smiled for photos. I cut the cake. I did all the things you're supposed to do at a wedding reception while feeling completely hollow inside. My family acted like nothing had happened. My mother came up to me later and said what a nice party it was. Emily asked if there was any cake left because she'd been too busy dancing to get a piece during the cake cutting. And my father came up to me and David and said he was glad we decided to have a traditional wedding instead of eloping. Said it was important for family to be together for these moments. Said these were the memories we'd cherish forever. I smiled, said thank you, hugged him when he left, because even after everything, I was still programmed to make things comfortable for them. The reception ended. David and I said goodbye to guests, thanked the vendors, collected cards and gifts. We were staying at the venue hotel that night, flying out for our honeymoon the next afternoon, so we headed up to our room around midnight. David immediately started apologizing, said he should have said something during the toast, should have protected me better. I told him it wasn't his fault. Told him I was fine. Told him let's just focus on the fact that we're married now. But he could see through it. He said, "Sarah, you don't have to pretend with me. What your father did was cruel." And hearing him say it, hearing someone validate that it was wrong and hurtful and not something I should just accept, broke something loose. I started crying, really crying, years of swallowed disappointment and minimized hurt just pouring out. David held me, didn't try to fix it or solve it, just held me while I finally grieved the family I'd never actually had. After a while, I pulled myself together, washed my face, changed out of my wedding dress, tried to salvage what was left of our wedding night. We talked for a long time. David asked me what I wanted to do, if I wanted to confront them, cut them off, talk to a therapist. I told him I didn't know. I just knew I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. We finally went to bed around 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the toast, my father's words. Around 3 a.m., I got out of bed, decided to go down to the hotel lobby, maybe get some water, try to clear my head. The lobby was empty except for the night desk clerk. I was heading toward the vending machines when I heard voices. Familiar voices coming from the hotel bar, which should have been closed, but apparently was still serving drinks to remaining wedding guests. I walked closer, peered around the corner, and saw my parents and Emily sitting at a table, drinks in hand. I should have walked away, should have gone back upstairs, but something made me stop, made me stay hidden and listen. And what I heard in the next 10 minutes answered questions I'd been asking my entire life. Questions I didn't even know I'd been asking. My mother was talking. She said, "Well, we got through it. Sarah's married off now. That's one less thing to worry about." My father laughed, said something about how at least David seemed stable enough to take care of me, which was good because I'd never been particularly ambitious. I'd heard stuff like this before, casual dismissals, backhanded compliments. That wasn't what made me freeze. What made me freeze was what my mother said next. She said, "I just wish she looked more like us." David's family probably wondered about that. Emily said something I couldn't quite hear, and my father responded, "Come on, it's not Sarah's fault. She didn't choose to look like him." The world tilted. I grabbed the wall to steady myself, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Like him, not us, him, someone else, someone I apparently looked like instead of looking like them. My mother kept talking, said she'd always felt guilty about it, about the lie. But what choice had she had at the time? Said my father, the man who raised me, who just toasted my sister at my wedding, had been kind to agree to raise another man's child. Said it explained why I'd always been different. Why I'd never quite fit in, it was in my blood, I was someone else's daughter. Emily said something about how weird it must be to have a half-sister, and my mother shushed her. Said I didn't know, and it needed to stay that way. Said it would just hurt me to know the truth. And what was the point of hurting me now that I was married and essentially out of their daily lives? My father, the man I'd called Dad my whole life, agreed. Said some secrets were better left buried. Said I seemed happy enough not knowing. And then they changed the subject, started talking about Emily's upcoming work trip to Chicago, laughing about something that happened at the reception. Just like that, they dropped a bomb about my entire existence being a lie and moved on to weekend plans. I don't remember walking back to the elevator, don't remember the ride up to my floor, don't remember opening the hotel room door. I just remember David waking up, seeing my face, and immediately asking what was wrong, and I couldn't even speak. I sat on the edge of the bed and told him what I'd heard. Every word I could remember, the implications I was starting to understand. David went very still, then he said, "Sarah, your whole life makes sense now. The way they've treated you. That wasn't about you being unlovable. That was about them not being able to see past their own resentment and guilt. You were a reminder of something they wanted to forget." And suddenly, everything did make sense. Every dismissal, every comparison to Emily, every time they couldn't muster enthusiasm for my achievements. I wasn't their daughter, not really. I was evidence of my mother's affair, a living, breathing reminder of her mistake. And they'd spent 28 years making me pay for it, making me feel small and wrong and unworthy. Not because there was anything wrong with me, but because every time they looked at me, they saw their own shame. I didn't imagine how many people would recognize themselves in that moment, the moment when you realize your family's treatment of you was never about you at all. David asked if I wanted to confront them, if I wanted to demand the truth, ask about my biological father, make them acknowledge what they'd done. I sat there for a long time, thinking about that. Part of me wanted to see their faces when they realized I knew. Wanted to make them explain themselves, justify decades of emotional neglect and cruelty. Wanted some kind of closure, or apology or acknowledgement. But the bigger part of me, the part that was finally waking up after years of sleep, knew the truth. Confronting them wouldn't give me what I needed. They'd never been capable of giving me what I needed. They'd deny it, or minimize it, or find a way to make it my fault for eavesdropping. They'd protect themselves like they always had. And even if they admitted everything, even if they apologized, it wouldn't undo 28 years of damage. I told David I didn't want to confront them. I wanted to leave, wanted to start our honeymoon early, wanted to begin building distance. He supported that decision completely. We packed our bags at 4 a.m, left a note at the front desk saying we decided to leave early. We drove to the airport, changed our flights, and by 9 a.m. we were on a plane to Greece, our honeymoon destination. My phone started ringing around noon. My mother, calling to say goodbye before we left. She didn't know we were already gone. I didn't answer. I turned my phone off, and for the first time in my life, I prioritized my own peace over their expectations. Greece was beautiful. We spent a week swimming, eating, exploring. David never pushed me to talk about it unless I wanted to. Sometimes I did want to. I'd process out loud, work through the memories that now had new context, grieve the childhood I should have had. Other times I just needed to exist in the present, to be Sarah, David's wife, a woman on her honeymoon, not damaged goods or an affair baby. Just Sarah, just myself, maybe for the first time ever, just myself without the weight of their judgment and disappointment. When we got home, there were 17 voicemails from my mother, 8 from my father, 3 from Emily. The first few were casual, asking how the honeymoon was. Then they got more insistent. Why wasn't I responding? Was I upset about something? The last voicemail from my mother was angry, said I was being childish, giving them the silent treatment over what, a toast. Said I'd always been too sensitive, took things too personally, needed to grow up and stop making everything about me. I listened to that voicemail 3 times, heard the lack of self-awareness, the inability to see how their behavior affected me. And I knew I was done trying to earn their love, done making excuses for them, done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I didn't call them back. Instead, I sent an email, kept it brief, said I needed space from the family for a while. Said I'd spent too long trying to force relationships that clearly weren't healthy for me, and I needed time to figure out what I wanted moving forward. My mother's response came within an hour, a long, rambling email about how hurt they were, how ungrateful I was being, how they'd given me everything, supported me my whole life, and this was how I repaid them, by cutting them off without explanation. There was no acknowledgement of the toast, no reflection on their behavior, just offense that I dared to create boundaries. Emily's text was simpler, said I was being dramatic, that Dad's toast wasn't that bad, that I was ruining the family over nothing. My father didn't reach out at all, which somehow hurt more than it should have, even though I knew the truth now. Even knowing he wasn't my biological father, part of me still wanted him to care enough to try. I didn't respond to any of them. David suggested I talk to a therapist, and I agreed, started seeing someone twice a week. Dr. Martinez was the first person outside of David who I told everything to, the years of neglect, the wedding toast, the overheard conversation. She didn't seem surprised by any of it. She said family scapegoating was more common than people realized. Said children often internalize the mistreatment, believe it's their fault, spend their lives trying to fix something that was never theirs to fix. She asked if I wanted to find my biological father. It was a question I'd been avoiding asking myself. The truth was, I didn't know. Part of me was curious, wanted to know where I came from, if I had other siblings, if he even knew I existed. But another part of me was afraid of rejection again, afraid of finding out he didn't want me either. Dr. Martinez said I didn't have to decide right away, said I could take all the time I needed to figure out what would be healing versus what would be re-traumatizing. Meanwhile, my mother kept trying to contact me, emails, calls, texts, each one more desperate or angry than the last. She showed up at my house twice. I didn't answer the door. David offered to talk to her, but I asked him not to. I knew what would happen if he did. She'd make herself the victim, cry about how cruel I was being, manipulate him into feeling sorry for her. After the second time she showed up unannounced, I sent one more email, told her the boundary was firm. Told her if she continued to violate it, I'd have no choice but to pursue more formal boundaries. I didn't specify what that meant. She responded with a long message about how I was breaking her heart, how she didn't understand what she'd done wrong, how she'd been the best mother she knew how to be, and I was punishing her for things she couldn't control. I read that email sitting at my kitchen table, coffee getting cold in my hands, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not guilt, just exhaustion at the predictability of it all. She genuinely couldn't see what she'd done, couldn't acknowledge the years of dismissal and comparison and casual cruelty. And more than that, she was still lying, still pretending I was her biological daughter, still hiding the truth. That's when I made my decision. I was going to find out who my biological father was. Not for closure with them, not to confront my mother or create some dramatic family showdown. But for me, because I deserved to know where I came from, I deserved to have all the information about my own life. I took a DNA test through one of those ancestry websites. David sat with me while I spit in the tube, sealed the package, sent it off. The waiting period was 6 weeks. 6 weeks of wondering what I'd find, who I'd find, if I'd find anything at all. During that time, something interesting happened. My extended family started reaching out. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all of them with variations of the same message. Your mother is so worried about you. Can't you just talk to her? Family is family. Whatever happened, it can't be worth this estrangement. It was clear my mother had reached out to everyone, painting herself as the concerned parent with an irrational, ungrateful daughter. Some of the messages were kind, genuinely trying to help. Others were judgmental, accusing me of being cold and unforgiving. I responded to a few of the kind ones, kept it brief, said I appreciated their concern, but this was between me and my parents. I didn't respond to the judgmental ones. I was learning that not every accusation deserved a defense. My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, was the only one who seemed to understand there might be more to the story. She called me and said, "I don't know what happened between you and your mother, but I know my sister can be difficult." She said if I ever needed someone to talk to, someone who knew the family but wasn't directly involved, she was there. I thanked her but didn't take her up on it. Not yet, maybe not ever. I wasn't ready to bring more family into this. The DNA results came back on a Tuesday afternoon. I was home alone. David was at work. I stared at the email for 10 minutes before opening it. The ancestry information was interesting but not immediately useful. European heritage, which I'd assumed, some distant cousins in the database. But then I saw it, a close family match, someone labeled as a potential half-sibling, a man named Marcus, age 32. I clicked on his profile with shaking hands. He'd made his information partially public, lived in Portland. There was a photo. He had my eyes, same shape, same color. It was uncanny, seeing my own features in a stranger's face. The website had a messaging feature. I spent an hour writing and rewriting a message to him. Finally sent something simple. Said the DNA test showed we might be related. Asked if he'd be open to talking. Understood if he wasn't. He responded within 2 hours. Said he'd been hoping to connect with matches. That he'd been adopted and was trying to find his biological family. He asked if we could video chat. I agreed. We set up a call for that weekend, giving me time to mentally prepare. I told David about the match that evening. He asked how I was feeling. I said I didn't know, nervous, hopeful, terrified. Saturday morning, I sat in my home office, laptop open, waiting for Marcus to join the video call. When his face appeared on screen, I actually gasped. The resemblance was even stronger in real time. He smiled, and it was my smile. He tilted his head while thinking, and I did the same thing. It was surreal. We talked for 3 hours. He told me his story. He'd been adopted as an infant, had great parents, a good childhood. But he'd always been curious about his biological family, did the DNA test a year ago, had been slowly connecting with matches. He'd found his biological mother's family already, but not his father, until now, apparently. I told him my story, not everything, but enough, that I'd recently learned the man who raised me wasn't my biological father, that my mother had never told me the truth, that I was trying to piece together my own history. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I think I know who our father is. I've been doing research for months." He shared his screen, showed me a family tree he'd been building, and there, at the center, was a name, James Caldwell. He explained that James had been in the military, stationed near where I grew up around the time I would have been conceived. He'd had at least 3 children with 3 different women, none of whom he'd married. Marcus was one, I appeared to be another. There might be others. James had died 4 years ago, so there was no possibility of meeting him or getting direct answers. I sat there, absorbing this information. My biological father was dead. I'd never get to ask him questions, never get to know him. Part of me felt relieved, no risk of rejection, no awkward first meeting, but part of me felt robbed. Robbed of the chance to understand where I came from, to see myself reflected in someone who'd created me. Marcus seemed to understand without me having to explain. He said, "I felt the same way when I found out he'd died. Like I'd lost something I never had, but connecting with you, with the others, it helps, we're still family." We talked about meeting in person. He lived in Portland, I lived in California, but it wasn't an impossible distance. We made plans for him to visit in a few weeks, ended the call promising to stay in touch, to keep sharing information as we found it. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, processing. I had a half-brother. My biological father was gone. My mother had kept this secret for 28 years. The man who raised me had known I wasn't his and treated me accordingly. It was a lot, but somehow, knowing the truth felt better than living in the confusion and self-blame. David came home and found me still sitting there, asked how the call went. I told him everything. He asked if I was going to tell my mother that I knew. I said no, at least not yet, maybe not ever. Because the truth was, I didn't owe her that confrontation. She'd had 28 years to be honest with me, and she'd chosen secrecy. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn honesty and love from people who weren't capable of giving it. Now I was choosing something different. I was choosing to build my own family, my own life, with people who actually valued me. Over the next few months, things settled into a new normal. I stayed in therapy, Marcus and I talked regularly. He visited for a weekend, and we discovered we had more in common than genetics, similar sense of humor, similar values. He met David, and they got along great. It felt good, building this new branch of family based on choice and mutual respect. My mother's attempts at contact became less frequent. She'd send an email every few weeks, usually on holidays or my birthday. Each one asked when I was going to stop being stubborn and come home. Each one blamed me for the estrangement. I didn't respond. Silence was my boundary, and I was learning to maintain it without guilt. Emily reached out once, about 6 months after the wedding, said she missed me, wanted to get coffee and talk. I actually considered it. Therapy had helped me separate Emily from my parents. She'd been raised in the same dysfunctional system. But as the golden child instead of the scapegoat, that wasn't entirely her fault. I agreed to meet her at a neutral coffee shop, drove there nervous, not sure what to expect. Emily showed up 10 minutes late, which was typical, sat down, ordered an elaborate coffee drink, didn't apologize for being late. She started the conversation by saying Mom and Dad were really hurt by my behavior, that I needed to apologize and move on. I asked her if she thought it was normal for a father to toast his other daughter at his daughter's wedding reception. I asked her if she remembered Dad's wedding toast. She waved it off, said it was just Dad being Dad, that I was overreacting. She got defensive, said I'd always been jealous of her, that I couldn't handle not being the center of attention for once. And there it was, the fundamental disconnect. Emily genuinely didn't see the problem because she'd never had to see it. She'd been centered her whole life. My pain was invisible to her, or worse, it was threatening. I kept my voice calm, told her I wasn't looking for an apology from her. But I needed her to understand this wasn't about jealousy. It was about years of being treated like I didn't matter, of being compared unfavorably, of being made to feel like a burden. She interrupted me, said I was being dramatic, making things up, rewriting history to make myself the victim, said our parents had always been fair, had always loved us both equally, and I was the problem for not seeing that. I realized in that moment that Emily and I were never going to have the relationship I'd sometimes hoped for. She wasn't capable of seeing outside her own experience. Maybe someday she would be, but today wasn't that day. I stood up, told her I appreciated her reaching out, but I didn't think we had anything more to say to each other right now. She looked shocked, said I was really going to throw away our whole family over nothing, over hurt feelings. I said it wasn't nothing to me, and I wasn't throwing anything away. I was choosing to protect myself. She called me selfish, said I'd always been selfish, always made everything about me, and she was done trying. I said okay, and I left, drove home feeling sad but also clear. I'd given her a chance, and she'd shown me exactly who she was. I believed her. I didn't need to keep trying to force connection with someone who saw me as the problem. Around the 1-year anniversary of my wedding, something unexpected happened. My Aunt Linda reached out again. She asked if we could have lunch, said she had something she wanted to talk to me about, and it was important. I agreed, cautiously. We met at a quiet restaurant. She hugged me when she saw me, held on a little longer than usual. Once we sat down, she didn't waste time. She said, I know why you've cut off your mother, and I think you're right to do it. I froze. She continued, I've known about your biological father since you were born. Your mother swore me to secrecy. But watching how she's treated you your whole life, watching how she's playing victim now, I can't stay silent anymore. She told me the story my mother had never told me, about the affair with James, about the pregnancy, about the decision to pass me off as her husband's child. She said my father, the man who raised me, had agreed to stay and raise me as his own, but he'd never forgiven my mother, and he'd never bonded with me the way he should have. Aunt Linda said she'd tried to intervene over the years. Tried to tell my mother that her guilt and his resentment were hurting me. But my mother had always shut down the conversation. She told me she was sorry for keeping the secret, sorry for not protecting me better, sorry for letting me grow up thinking I was the problem. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was angry that she'd known and stayed silent, but part of me understood. Family loyalty is complicated. She'd been caught between protecting me and protecting her sister. I asked her why she was telling me now. She said because you deserve to know you were never the problem. Your mother made choices and she made you pay for them your whole life. That wasn't fair, and I should have said something sooner. We talked for 2 hours. She answered questions I'd been carrying my whole life, filled in gaps, confirmed suspicions. She asked if I'd found my biological father's family. I told her about Marcus. She smiled and said she was glad I wasn't alone in this. Before we left, she said, "Your mother is telling everyone you're mentally unstable, that you've fabricated reasons to hate her. I wanted you to know that some of us see through it. Some of us know the truth. You're not crazy, Sarah." That validation meant more than I expected. I'd been second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. But hearing someone who'd witnessed my childhood confirm that my feelings were valid, that helped something settle inside me. Life moved forward. David and I bought a house. I got a promotion at work. Marcus became a regular part of my life. I discovered through DNA testing that I had another half-sibling, a sister named Claire. We started building a relationship too. I built a chosen family of people who saw me, valued me, showed up for me. It looked different than I'd imagined family would look. But it was real, it was healthy, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My mother tried to contact me on my 30th birthday. A long email about how she'd been thinking about the day I was born. How proud she was to be my mother. How much she loved me, how she hoped I'd come home soon. I read it twice, looked for any acknowledgement of her behavior, any sign of self-reflection. There was none. It was all about her feelings, her pain, her love, no recognition of how she'd hurt me. I deleted it, and I realized I didn't feel guilty anymore, didn't feel like I owed her anything. I'd spent 30 years trying to earn love from people who decided before I was even born that I wasn't worth it. I was done, not in an angry way, not in a vengeful way, just in a peaceful, this is over way. I sometimes wonder if my mother knows that I know the truth, if she suspects what I overheard that night. If she lies awake worrying that I'll expose her secret, tell the extended family, make her face consequences. But I haven't, not because I'm protecting her, but because I don't need to. The truth is mine now. I know who I am, I know where I came from, I know my story, even the parts they tried to hide from me. And I'm building a life where I'm chosen, celebrated, seen. That's better than any confrontation could ever be. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not confronting my parents, if I wish I'd demanded answers, made them acknowledge what they did. The truth is, I don't regret it. Confrontation would have been for them, not for me. It would have given them a chance to defend themselves, minimize their behavior, make excuses. I didn't need to hear any of that. I already knew the truth, walking away, building my own life. That was my choice, my power. David and I are talking about having kids. It's terrifying and exciting in equal measure. I worry sometimes that I'll repeat patterns, that I'll hurt my children the way I was hurt. But Dr. Martinez reminds me that awareness is the first step, that I'm nothing like my parents because I'm willing to examine myself. Because I know what neglect looks like, what favoritism does to a child, what secrets can destroy. And I'm committed to doing better, to raising children who feel seen and valued and celebrated just for existing. I think about my wedding sometimes, that toast, the humiliation, the moment I realized I'd never matter to them. It should have been the worst day of my life, and in some ways, it was devastating. But it was also the day I started waking up, started questioning the narrative I'd accepted my whole life. Started realizing that maybe the problem wasn't me, maybe it had never been me. If I could go back and change that day, I'm not sure I would, because that pain led to clarity. That clarity led to boundaries, and those boundaries led to the life I'm living now. A life where I'm not constantly trying to earn love, where I'm not making myself smaller to make others comfortable. Where I'm just Sarah, flawed and learning and healing, but also whole, and worthy, and finally free. I still have hard days, days when I see a family laughing together and feel that old ache of what I didn't have. Days when I wonder what it would have been like to grow up feeling unconditionally loved. But I also have good days, days when Marcus texts me something funny, days when Claire calls just to chat. Days when David looks at me like I'm the most important person in his world, days when I believe him. The family you're born into isn't always the family you deserve. Sometimes you have to build your own. Find people who choose you the way you choose them, who show up, who see you, who celebrate you. It's not the same as having that foundation from the beginning. I won't pretend the absence doesn't leave scars. But chosen family, built on intention and respect, can be just as real, sometimes more real. I got a letter last month, not an email, an actual handwritten letter, forwarded to me by Aunt Linda. It was from my father, the man who raised me. He said he'd been diagnosed with cancer, stage 4, not much time left. He said he wanted to see me before he died, said there were things he needed to say. I sat with that letter for 3 days, showed it to David, to Dr. Martinez, to Marcus. Everyone told me the decision was mine, but they'd support me either way. No one pushed me in any direction. I thought about what I needed, not what he needed, not what would look good to others, what would serve my healing. And I realized I didn't need to see him. I didn't need his deathbed confession or apology. If he'd wanted to have a relationship with me, he'd had 30 years to build one. Dying didn't erase that choice. I wrote him back, kept it brief, said I wished him peace in his final days, but I wouldn't be visiting. Said I'd made peace with our relationship, or lack thereof, and I didn't need anything from him now. My mother called me after she received my letter, first time I'd heard her voice in over 2 years. She was crying, screaming, calling me heartless. How could I deny a dying man the chance to see his daughter? I let her finish, then I said, very calmly, he's not my father, we both know that. He made sure I knew that my whole life. The line went silent, for a full 30 seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she whispered, how long have you known? And I said, long enough, I know everything. She started to say something, to explain or defend, but I cut her off. I said I didn't need her explanation. I'd figured it out on my own, built relationships with my real family, and made peace with all of it. I said maybe that was true. But it didn't change the fact that I'd been a child, and children deserve better than her best had been. She tried to argue, said she'd done her best, said I was being unfair, said I didn't understand how hard it had been for her. I said I didn't hate her. I just didn't have space in my life for people who'd spent decades making me feel worthless. I told her I hoped she and my father found peace with each other and with whatever guilt they were carrying. But I was done carrying it for them, done making myself small so they could feel big. I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number, felt lighter than I had in months. My father died 3 weeks later. Aunt Linda called to tell me, asked if I wanted to come to the funeral. I said no, sent flowers, sent a card, but I didn't go, didn't need that closure. Some people in the family judged me for that, called me cold, unforgiving, said I'd regret it. But I don't. I mourn the father I wished I'd had years ago. The man who died was a stranger who resented my existence. I didn't owe him my presence at his funeral just because DNA and secrets connected us. After the funeral, Emily tried to reach out one more time, said we only had each other now, said we should try to repair things. But her message still didn't include any acknowledgement of what had happened, any understanding of why I'd left. Just an expectation that I should come back now, play the role of grieving daughter, be the family member she wanted. I didn't respond. I think that silence was harder for her to accept than any confrontation would have been. Because silence meant she couldn't argue with me, couldn't convince me, couldn't make it about her. Silence meant I'd moved on, that I was living a life that didn't include her, and I was okay with that. A few months ago, David and I found out I'm pregnant. We're having a daughter. When the ultrasound technician told us, I cried not sad tears, happy tears mixed with terror. Because I'm going to be someone's mother, and I know exactly what kind of mother I don't want to be. I know I want her to feel celebrated, to feel seen, to feel like her existence is a gift, not a burden. I want her to know she's loved unconditionally, that she doesn't have to earn my affection or attention. That she can be herself, messy and imperfect and growing, and I'll be there cheering her on. Marcus is going to be an uncle, Claire is going to be an aunt, they're both thrilled. My daughter will grow up surrounded by people who chose each other, who built family on purpose. She'll never wonder if she's loved, she'll never feel invisible, she'll never question her worth. And if she ever asks me about my parents, her grandparents, I'll tell her the truth. Age-appropriate truth, but truth nonetheless. I won't lie to protect people who didn't protect me. I'll tell her that sometimes people who should love you aren't capable of it. And that's sad. But it's not her fault or my fault. I'll tell her that we get to choose who we let into our lives, that boundaries are healthy, that walking away is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. I'll teach her that family isn't just biology, it's commitment and respect and showing up and choosing each other every day. I'm scared sometimes, scared I'll mess up, scared I'll hurt her without meaning to, scared I'll pass on trauma I haven't fully healed. But I'm also hopeful because I know what not to do, I know the mistakes not to make. And I'm willing to do the work, to stay in therapy, to keep examining my patterns and choices. To break cycles that have probably been running in my family for generations. I think about my wedding day sometimes, about standing there in my dress, listening to my father toast my sister. About the humiliation, about the moment I realized I'd been fighting for crumbs of affection my entire life. If you told me that day that 3 years later I'd be pregnant, surrounded by chosen family, at peace with being estranged from my parents, I wouldn't have believed you. The grief felt too big, the pain felt permanent. But here I am, not perfect, not completely healed, but free in ways I never thought possible. Free from the constant need for approval, free from making myself small, free from believing I'm fundamentally unlovable. I've learned that you can grieve people who are still alive, that you can love the idea of family while accepting the reality of dysfunction. That walking away doesn't make you cruel, it makes you responsible for your own well-being. I've learned that healing isn't linear. Some days I'm angry about what they took from me, other days I'm just sad. That you don't need them to understand or apologize or change, you just need to move forward. I've learned that closure doesn't always come from confrontation, sometimes it comes from deciding you've heard enough. And some days, increasingly more days, I'm just grateful for where I am now. My mother hasn't tried to contact me in over a year. I don't know if she's given up or if she's just waiting. Part of me wonders if she'll try to reach out when she finds out about the baby, if she'll want to be a grandmother. But I've already decided. She doesn't get access to my daughter. She doesn't get to do to another generation what she did to me. David supports that decision completely. He says our daughter will have plenty of people who love her. She doesn't need grandparents who will make her feel less than, who will compare her to cousins, who will use love as a weapon. I agree. Breaking cycles means making hard choices, means protecting the next generation even when it hurts. Sometimes I imagine what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I'd swallowed the wedding toast and kept playing my role. I'd probably still be making excuses for them, still trying to earn love that would never come. Still believing there was something wrong with me instead of something wrong with how I was treated. I'd probably be teaching my daughter those same patterns, how to be small, how to not need too much, how to accept less than she deserves. Walking away saved me, and it's going to save her too. The hardest part about all of this wasn't the estrangement itself, it was learning to trust my own perception. When you grow up being told your feelings are wrong, your memories are incorrect, your reactions are overblown, you start to doubt yourself constantly, you start to think maybe you are the problem. Therapy helped me reclaim that trust, helped me understand that my feelings were valid responses to real mistreatment. That I wasn't being dramatic or sensitive or ungrateful, I was being human. And humans need love and recognition and celebration, especially from the people who bring them into the world. I wish I could go back and tell younger me that none of it was her fault. That the little girl getting ignored at the dinner table, the teenager whose achievements were minimized, the woman standing in her wedding dress listening to a toast about her sister, none of them deserved that treatment. I tell her to stop trying so hard, to save her energy for people who value it, to understand that some people aren't capable of love, and that's about them, not about her. But I can't go back, I can only move forward, and that's what I'm doing. One day at a time, building a life that feels authentic, surrounding myself with people who see me, creating the family I always deserved, breaking the cycles that tried to break me. So this is where I am now, 3 years after the wedding that changed everything. Married to someone who loves me unconditionally, building relationships with siblings I never knew I had. About to become a mother myself, estranged from the people who raised me. And finally, after 30 years, learning what it feels like to be chosen. To be celebrated, to be enough exactly as I am. It's not the story I thought I'd be living, but it's mine, and I'm making peace with all of it. The pain, the discovery, the loss, the freedom. Have you ever had to walk away from people who should love you?